choose your family. And for some of us, that's not such a bad thing. We basically like the people that we're stuck with. Sure, they're weird, but at least they're our kind of weird. For others of us, however, as we know, it's a little more daunting. As we know, every family has some level of, shall we say, dysfunction, but some are more dysfunctional than others. And depending on just how dysfunctional it gets, it can be pretty hard to step out of those challenges. The good news is we live in a time in which there are lots of possibilities for doing it. It is possible, it just takes some work. Not only do we have a great mental health system if we're willing to call on it, we as a people of faith have years of collected wisdom for how to overcome some really serious brokenness. We need only open up to basically any book in our Bible, any chapter of our Bible, and we will see a highly dysfunctional family. And the good news for us is that if they were able to make it through, there just might be hope for us. And so today, on this tent Sunday, on this day that is so intense, we were tentative about that one, but we'll get that. On this day when we step outside of our building and into the fresh air, let's just get it out in the open. Our family has issues. Not just our immediate family, though it might. Not just our faith family, though it might. But the human family has issues. To be honest, this is a summer when that has been hard to ignore. Every time we turn on the news or open up our papers or see that new alert on our phone, we seem to be reminded again that there is a challenge between our brothers and sisters. We've come to recognize the pain of racism, of gun violence, of poverty. We see it over and over again, and we are starting to be a little more fearful. It's enough to make us want to just throw our hands up, to give up, and to say there's nothing we can do. We might as well build a wall and keep ourselves in. But as a people of faith, we don't get that choice. As a people of faith, we recognize that we are bound to one another. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we recognize that the best is yet to come. But if we are going to get there, it will take each and every one of us recognizing that we are a part of the same rather large and, yes, rather dysfunctional family. It will take people like us expanding the size of our tent. The good news is that even as we do it imperfectly, as our scripture lesson reminds us, we don't do it alone. God walks with us. Today we hear the story of a rather dysfunctional family, like really, really dysfunctional, makes the Kardashians look normal. It's a family that we have, if you have paid attention to this gospel or to the Genesis story, if you followed it along, you know that it comes from a long line of dysfunction, as it often happens. It doesn't just pop up overnight. We followed it through Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau, and now to Joseph and his brothers. We spent the last couple of chapters in this book, in the book of Genesis, hearing about the challenges that came when Jacob, Joseph's dad, had felt the favoritism to his brother Esau, and just how much pain that had caused him, and all the different things that he did to try and avoid it. And so, when he had a family of his own and he stepped into it, he decided to do the exact same thing to his own sons. We recognize this pattern. Dysfunction comes up, and we have this tendency to repeat unless we've worked really hard, those patterns that are so well established in our families. We see it in particular in the isms, alcoholism, and others. We see it in those systems of abuse. But we likely all see it to a greater or lesser degree in our own lives. Who among us hasn't at some point said something or done something that we promised ourselves we would never say or do because we didn't like it when they did it to us? The system is hard to escape. If we don't work hard, what goes around comes around. So in our story, Jacob, now called Israel, has his 12 sons, one of whom he loved the most. And normally when we tell the story, and we're telling it today because the Vacation Bible School kids will be focusing on Joseph when he's in Egypt all week. Today we hear the story about how he gets there, namely when his brothers sell him into slavery. So as you can tell, there's some challenges in that family. But normally when we tell the story, we just focus on the brothers and we think, for shame, how could they do that? But the truth is it comes from somewhere. The first time we hear about Joseph right at the very beginning of chapter 37 in Genesis, we have Joseph running in to give a poor report about his brothers from out in the field. His 11 brothers are out working. He is reporting to his dad just how poorly they are working. Now maybe his dad asked him to do that, to be fair, but we start to get an inkling of why his brothers would have been a little annoyed with Joseph. That and the fact that every chance he had, their dad kept saying, well, Joseph is my favorite. In fact, he loved Joseph so much that he had just given him a fancy new coat, a long robe with stripes. It was technicolored. It was a dream coat. We hear. It was amazing. Speaking of which, auditions are in a few weeks. So Joseph had this amazing technicolor dream coat, and his brothers were really annoyed. And then he decides to add fuel to the fire by sharing with them his dreams. He says his first dream was, so I had this dream, we were all out working in the fields, sort of ironic given the fact that Joseph hasn't been doing much work in the field. We were all out working in the field binding sheaves, and my sheaf stood upright and your sheaves all bowed down to it. And his brothers, starting to get a little annoyed, listen to his next dream. Out of kindness, I'm sure. He says to them, I had this other dream in which the sun and the moons and 11 stars were all circling around me. Now we start to wonder whether or not Joseph was just painfully naive to how he sounded, or whether he knew exactly what he was doing. We don't know. But as with most challenging stories, we know that there's more to it than we know about. It's so easy for us to touch down in a story that we hear, especially when it relates to family, and think we have the whole picture. But the truth is, you never know what's going on in another person's life. And so Joseph tells this story, his dreams, to his brother. It's a little like saying to your friends, I keep having this dream in which I'm so much better than you guys. What do you think that means? And his brothers are being patient and kind until the story today. It begins with Joseph going out again, assumably to offer another report about his brothers, which I'm sure would not be a pleasant report. Except this time he can't find his brothers. And he's looking all around, and finally he finds a friend who points him in the right directions. He says, I think I've seen your brothers out in this field. And so Joseph goes out, and he's heading to the field, and his brothers see him coming. And they pause, and while they see him coming, they get this idea. They said, oh, here comes the dreamer. Now, this is where it starts to go awry. They could decide to have a really nice conversation with him, help them understand why his actions have not benefited them, and perhaps give him the opportunity to change his ways. But what fun is that? Instead, they decide to kill him, to take his coat, they loved that coat, and throw him into a pit. And so that's what they're going to decide to do, except that fortunately for Joseph, there's this older brother, Reuben, who's there. And Reuben says, you know what, actually we probably shouldn't kill him, he is our brother. Let's make sure we get the coat, we love that coat. But let's throw him down into a pit without killing him. Sure, there's no water and it will probably kill him, but let's just leave it be that way, the blood is not on our hands. And so that's what they do. They strip him down, they throw him into the pit, and they share a meal. Now we know that when we, from our own lives, though we likely haven't made that particular mistake, hopefully, we know that what happens when we don't allow ourselves to find that outlet. When we don't find that person that we can share with, that group that we can let off some steam, we know that we often make really poor decisions, not usually throwing people in pits, but we know that our decisions are not good when we haven't found that right place. So he's in a pit, the brothers are sharing a meal, and then another brother, Judah, looks over and he sees an Ishmaelite caravan. Now those who don't remember the story might remember Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. Yes, well at first he only had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And so Ishmael was not with Sarah. Again, some challenging family systems here, right? And then you have Isaac, which gave birth to Jacob and Esau, and then you have Jacob with Joseph. So the Ishmaelite caravan is coming through, also a symptom of this family dynamic. It's coming through, and Judah says, hey, what profit is it to us if we kill our brother and throw him into a pit? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. Now we know that when money gets involved, we often make some really poor decisions. Exhibit A, our current political system. We know that money has a challenge when it enters into our lives that we don't always see the right way forward, and this is no exception. Not to mention there's some fuzzy logic going on here. He's saying, guys, this is our brother, we can't kill him. Plus if we do, we don't get any money for him. And so they sell him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelite caravan, and the brothers stand and watch Joseph as he's taken away to Egypt, never to be heard from again. Or so they think. Tune in next week for the exciting conclusion to the Joseph story. Now, in fairness, when a story like this ends in this way, it leaves us sort of scratching our heads. We don't like it when a story ends at a low point, and friends, this is a low point, at least for Joseph. It sort of makes us wonder, so what's the point of this story? We're just not supposed to show favoritism because it might lead to being sold into slavery? Okay. Or maybe we're not supposed to show our hubris and be so arrogant around our brothers because it might lead to being sold into slavery. We don't know. But perhaps this is the human challenge in a nutshell, that in the moment, we don't always know how a story is going to end. And while it's fine and dandy when things are going well in our lives, it's decidedly harder when things are not. When we find ourselves struggling, when we find ourselves in that proverbial pit, it can be hard to know where to find our hope. Perhaps that is where we have been this summer. Every time we turn on the news and we hear another story of violence, every time we hear of another thing to be scared about, it becomes just another reason for us to let go of our hope, to lose ourselves to the fear. But friends, that was not the end of Joseph's story, and it's not the end of ours as well. As a people of faith, the promise of our faith is that the story is still going. As people who proclaim Jesus Christ, we believe that not even death can destroy our story, that can't stop our lives. We believe that the best is yet to come, but if we are going to get there, it means each and every one of us recognizing our place in the larger family. As scary as it has been, the spread of the Zika virus is a reminder to us of just how interconnected we are. We can't, as much as we'd like to, escape one another. We are bound to one another. On a more positive note, when you watch the opening ceremony of the Olympics, we are reminded of just how different we are from around the world, but how much we want the same things. We all long as human beings for connection to one another. We all long for meaning and for belonging and for love. And the good news is we have a place that offers it if we're willing to make our tent big enough. The good news is we don't have to face it alone, and because of that we know that we have hope. But as Augustine said, hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger to recognize the injustices of this world, and the courage to do something about them. Friends, we can throw up our hands, we can build a wall, but it's hard to love our neighbors through a wall. We have to find our way to reach out to one another, person to person, soul to soul, and until that, the story is going to be ongoing. We are all a part of the same family. It doesn't matter our background, it doesn't matter where we've come from, it matters where we're going, which is all in the same direction. Let us find our way towards love together. That is why we are here. Which means, friends, whenever we start to feel like we are trapped in that pit, all we have to do is look around and remember that we have family near. Yes, they're strange, but there are kind of strange. Friends, the good news of the gospel is that while you can choose your friends, you can't choose your family. And once we recognize that we're all a part of the same dysfunctional group, until we get to that point, the story will always be continued. May it be so. Amen.